I really want to start with the story. There's it's a shtickle bakanta story. If you didn't hear it, it's a great story. If you heard it, it's still a great story. You just know it already. They say over a story about Aaron Cutler. The way the story is best told is that in 1986, when Reb Shneur was the Rosh Yeshiva of Beis Medrash Kavaya, a limousine with two beefy Italian men pulls up outside yeshiva, right? It's a bakanta story. And they ask for the Rosh Yeshiva. Reb Shneur comes out. They say, no, the Rosh Yeshiva should be older than this. It should be an old man. They say, no, the old man's gone, but tell me what you need, and maybe the young Rosh Yeshiva, the son, could do it for you. They say, we're sent here on behalf of Joseph Bonanno. He's the head of the Bonanno crime family, one of the famous mobsters, and he needs a blessing from the Rosh Yeshiva. So Reb Shneur's like, what's this about? So he says, when our father was younger, in the 1940s, and there were some students who were stuck in Italy during the World War II, and it was suggested that my father would be able to help them get out of Italy, and your rabbi had a meeting with my father, and he, through his passionate words, he convinced my father that it's worth getting involved, and my father asked for a blessing, and your rabbi blessed him, and he told him that he should have long life, and he should die peacefully on his bed. And now he was involved in some sort of altercation. He was shot, and he's in critical condition. And we need to re-up the blessing. He's only, 70. He's not... and Reb Shneur told him, that power of giving the blessing I don't have anymore. But, best of luck. And Joseph Bonanno dies in 2002, I think, at like almost 100 years old. So Yitaka is a Richas Yom. Now, whether the story happened or not, I have no idea. But it's a good story. There's a lot of different versions of the story. But the Nakuda that I wanted from the story is that Rav Aaron's bracha was two components. He said he should have a Richas Yamim, and azol shtarben auf sein eigenes bet. He should die in his own bed. Now, dying on his own bed is itself a bracha. He shouldn't die, in the street like a gangster. He should die in his own bed.
Especially what do you say? Especially when you're Joe Bonanno.
Yeah, exactly. That's when you need the bracha, especially. But he should die in his own bed. So now it got me thinking. What is the best way to die? What is the special way to die? Does the way a person die, does it say anything about him? Is it important? So the truth is that it has to do with this week's parsha, because Moshe Rabbeinu, when Korach rises up against Moshe Rabbeinu tells him, Al Pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that if you're going to die like everybody else will die, a normal death, then we'll have proven nothing. But if something out of the ordinary is going to happen, and the earth will open up and swallow you up, then everybody will know that you rebelled against Hashem, and Hashem's designated leader, and your death will kind of show that. Now, I saw in the Sefer Chaver Ben Chaim, Chaver Ben Chaim, one of some Sefer's Talmidim, he brings that some Sefer once met a secular doctor who told him, I don't understand. You guys make a whole big deal about Korach dies, he gets sucked into the ground, it's a whole big mess, it proves Moshe Rabbeinu. Please, there's earthquakes exist. There must have been an earthquake in the Midbar. And Moshe Rabbeinu, being the crafty leader that he was, he co-opted the earthquake and he said, you see, he never should have argued with me. And then these people died in an earthquake, and nothing really happened. So the Chasam Sofer brought rayas from Ramban and other Rishonim, but the Chasam Sofer basically said that there was a unique type of proceeding that happened over. He said, the Chasam Sofer says, earthquakes, the earth has developed some sort of fissure, like along a tectonic plate. But when the tectonic plates move and there's an earthquake, whatever crevice or fissure is opened up in the ground, it stays open. Meaning you could even look at sediment from thousands of years ago, and you'll see layers where things open, where they were fault zones and etc. He says, but over here, what happened is the earth opened up like a snake's mouth, and it just sucked them in individually. He brings a raya. The Gemara in Eruvin says that the Pesach Shel Gehenna is tsar. It's very narrow. The gate to Gehenna is narrow. We know that the Gemara Bava Basra tells us that the Korach v'Hadassah are still loitering at the mouth to Gehenna. The Gemara Bava Basra tells us Rav Abba went and he was able to put his ear to it and hear, Adas Korach saying Moshe Terasayama. So they're loitering at the Pesach of Gehenna. So Chasam Sofer explained that the Misa that Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, this special outlandish Misa that Moshe Rabbeinu was predicting, that Moshe Rabbeinu would be like an indicator of the Avon and Korach did, was this exceptional Misa of the earth opening up and sucking them in in a very abnormal, unnatural way, and then closing up afterwards, like a mouth closes, like a snake's mouth. It opens and it closes. So in the Torah in this week's parasha, you see clearly that, at least in that occurrence, how a person dies was very indicative of where that person's standing. Meaning, what type of person are you when you die that way? Now, so then I was thinking about it. There's if you daven Nusach Svard and you say brachas properly every morning, the second Yehiratzin, you daven for Yehiratzin. One of the things you daven for is that you shouldn't die in Misa Mishana. A person shouldn't die in Misa Mishana. That's what you're davening for. So it seems, again, like dying in Misa Mishana. Now maybe it's just painful, but dying in Misa Mishana is something that everybody wants to avoid. The Gemara in Bracha says that a person should daven Leis Mitzai. Leis Mitzai is a Misa Yafa, the Gemara says. It means like a nice Misa, a good Misa. Now there's many different things that are said in different Svarim about the right time to die, the right place to die. I saw Al Pi Kabbalah that Adam Rishon, the Gemara says, was comprised of earth samples from all over the world. This is what Rav Chaim Vital's Masber. He's comprised of earth samples from all over the world. So he was like this big amalgamation of all the earth in the world. Now the Mekubalim say that every neshama that comes afterwards is a small piece of Adam Rishon. So a piece that was from Adam Rishon's, left pinky toe really comes from the earth of Sri Lanka. So the neshama, when it's ready to go back, goes to the place where it's home, where it comes from, and that's where it returns to the Afra. Like Shuv la'afrach, it goes back to where it comes from. It says the Mekubalim say that's why people die in different spots, meaning where a person dies is almost like predestined from the time of Adam Rishon. His neshama comes from, like this Adam Mekubalim Masber. Stam, it just reminds me of something. This is negayah to what just happened in Israel. I heard a cute story. The Pnei Menachem, the Ger Rebbe, who was the Rishiva during the 1990s when the Scud missiles were coming, before Iranian missiles, and he told the Bachram in Yeshiva, no one has to worry. He said every missile has a name on it. Like every bullet has a name, every missile has a name. You don't have to worry about it. So then he found out that the Bachram were going on the roof and they were watching the missiles, fly overhead, and he was furious. He calls them in and he says, Tachin, you're standing on the roof, you're watching, putting yourself in sakana, it's dangerous. Why are you not in the miklat where you're supposed to be? And one precocious young Ger Bacher mustered up the courage and he says, Shiva, you told us that every missile has a name, every bomb has a name. What do we have to be worried about for? He says, yeah. There's some missiles that it says in them, L'chol man debai, whoever wants. Anyone who's looking for it, there's a missile. This is a free missile. It says there's some missiles that say L'chol man debai. So as much as death is predetermined, there's still the L'chol man debai element of it. You could choose it. But Akban, that's in the Mekubalim Masber. Now, so I just wanted to highlight, I think, a few interesting different types of deaths and what they say about a person. Now, the first one I want to talk about is like this. There's a famous Indian. Anyone here is a Kohen? Who's a Kohen? You're a Kohen, right? You're a Kohen? Yeah, you're a Kohen. So there's a call it a minig or an haga that some Eretz Yisrael didn't have and some Hasidim adapted for themselves, is that Kehanim could go to the graves of tzaddikim. Now, which type of tzaddik qualifies is shmuz, but it originally started at like Kivrei Avos, like Mars Machpelah, Kever Rachel, etc. And then, of course, like everything does, it bled into, other Kvarim and there's a minig amongst some Kehanim in Eretz Yisrael, some Chassidim in particular, that they're makel for Kehanim to go to Kvarim. Now, where does this come from? What is this about? So there's a Bakanta Taisvis. Taisvis in Ksubis, by the Sugi of Ashkavta the Rebbe. When the Gemara in Ksubis and Nafkal Gimel talks about Rebbe's Petira, so Taisvis brings an interesting thing. I want to read it for you. Taisvis says as follows. It's on Kov Gimel Midbeis. Taisvis says, Rav Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen. This is one of the Talmidim of Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen is one of the Talmidim of Rabbeinu Tam. Rav Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen Haya Omer Ilmali Hayisi. If I would have been around, Kishay Nifter Rabbeinu Tam, and Rabbeinu Tam was Nifter, Hayisi Metamalai, I would have let myself become Tamei to him. The Habat the Kedusha the Kamaracha and Kedusha's Kahuna. Because when the Gemara says that Mishameis Rabbi Bat the Kedusha, it's referring to the Kedusha's Kahuna, and even Kehanim were allowed to make themselves Tamei to the Kohen. So this is not something to be trifled with. This is a deya of one of the named and known Bali Ataisis, Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen, who was a Talmud of Rabbeinu Tam, saying very clearly about himself that if he would have known when Rabbeinu Tam was Nifter, he would have been Batam himself because Tzadikim are Doichetoma. This is a Zayzak Taisis in Ksubis. Now, one of the Makairis that is brought for this, one of the famous Makairis, is a Medrash in Mishlei. Now, it's a famous Medrash, and Taisis handles it elsewhere, but let's just read from the Medrash a little bit. The Medrash tells us about Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, we know, was put to death by the Romans. Rabbi Akiva found himself in prison. It says Rabbi Yeshua was keeping Rabbi Akiva company. Eventually, Rabbi Yeshua went home. And while Rabbi Yeshua went home, obviously, everything went down, and Rabbi Akiva was put to death. So it says, Ba'aliyah, Ba'amad al Pesach Beisei Shel Rabbi Yeshua. He stood at the doorway of Rabbi Yeshua. Amalei Eliyahu, Shalom Alecha Rabbi. Amalei Shalom Alecha Rabbi Meiri. Okay, Amalei Rabbi Yeshua. This is just like the quirks of the Medrash. He says, Klumat Tetzarach Mimani Davar. Rabbi Yeshua says, Das Tepis. Like you came to say hello, or you need something from me. Now, what I presume is happening over here is that Chazal tell us that someone who gives bad news is exil. You're not supposed to share bad news. It's grab the pasuk in Mishlei. So Eliyahu probably was refraining from jumping right into the bad news. He came, he said Shalom Aleichem, then he was just like hoping that maybe Rishua would, 1 + 1 and figure it out. So Rishua says, Daf stepis, I'm like Kayin ani. I'm a Kayin. Ubasi lahagid l'chashir b'kiva meis. The Nereg Beis Asurim. So it sounds like Eliyahu is saying, I'm a Kayin, Kfura I can't do, because I'm a Kayin. But you, Rabbi Shua, I need some help getting Rabbi Akiva. So it says, Miyad holchu shneim l'Beis Asurim. They went to the prison, Umatzu as Pesach Beis Shar Beis Asurim, Pasuach. Besar Beis Asayir Hayasham. The guard is sleeping, and the door to the jail is open. Everybody's asleep. They laid Rabbi Akiva's body down on a bed. Yatsu, they went out. Miyad, it says as soon as they leave, Miyad netapel Eliyahu zachal atayv not the Alkseifav. Eliyahu gets frustrated with the pace of the work. He just grabs it, puts Rabbi Akiva on his shoulder, and he starts carrying him. Look, Shirar Rabbi Shua Hagarsi Kach Amal Eliyahu. He says, Rabbi Halei Martali Ani Eliyahu Kayin. The Kayin Asal Tamab Meis. You literally, your introduction to me was you're a Kayin. That's why you need help. Why are you carrying the dead person? Don't worry, Rabbi Shua, chas v'shalom, there's no tumah by tzadikim. So this is a medrash. Now, a medrash, you can't paskin from mamish, but this is considered one of the primary sources that seem to show Rav Chaim Kain's anhager, meaning Rav Chaim Kain didn't invent this idea. What do you say? So the whole story is like kasha. It's shver minei ubei. Why did he come? Why did he need Rabbi Shua? Why did he wait till Rabbi Shua first came? Then he gets involved. Why does he tell him he's a kohen and then he changes his mind? It's a shver medrash. It's a shtickle shver medrash. But this is what the medrash says. Now, so you have Tosfos that's bringing Rabbeinu Chaim Kain, which is a serious shita, and we have a source from the medrash that seems to back it up that tumah by tzadikim doesn't apply. Now, Lamaisa Tosfos in the Gemara, but Tosfos in B'Metzi and Daf Kufi Daled is something interesting. Is as follows: the Gemara over there talks about Eliyahu meeting Rabbi Bar Avua, and the meeting takes place in a Beis Hakfaros Shalev Dekachavim, in a Goyish Beis Hakfaros. Rabbi Bar Avua is in a Goyish Beis Hakfaros. He meets Eliyahu and Avi standing. And the Gemara over there describes a few shilas. He asks him 2-3 halacha shilas, and then he asks him, "Amalei lav kayin with mar." But just if I must, aren't you a kayin? What are you doing over here? My time a kayin Rabbi Beis Hakfaros. Why are you here? Amalei lemisni mar tairis Titania B'Shimon Yichayim Kivrein Shalev Dekachavim Meina Metamin. He says, what, you're not Maretz? You don't know that Goyish Shekvarim are not Matam? I'm allowed to be here. That's what Eliyahu Navi tells him. So now, Halei Davarhu, over here Eliyahu Navi gives a different teretz. Well, again, they're not tzaddikim. But Eliyahu gives a different teretz. He always says, no, I'm allowed to be here because it's not, these are not Goyim, these are not Matam. Now, Tosfos over here in the Kufi Daled and Beis and B'Metzia, Tosfos says, V'chein matzinu k'shay kaiver ser Rakiva, ha'yedei chashamal v'chein chakayin, amalei tzaddikim in Matam, and v'dachai sekem b'shum k'vayde der Rakiva. Tosfos says over here, this that you find in the Medrash, that Eliyahu was taking Rabbi Akiva's body and he met Rabbi Shua, and Rabbi Shua confronted him and he gave him a teretz at tzaddikim and avatama. It was just the dechiyah ba'alma. Out of respect for Rabbi Akiva, he wanted to say it, but that's not really the teretz. The real teretz is, he says, because Rabbi Akiva was a meis mitzvah. He was all alone in a prison somewhere. Rabbi Shua, according to Eliyahu Navi's estimation, was not getting the job quick enough. There was a risk that the guards would wake up and then they would come and take the body back. In order to make sure that it happened quickly, Eliyahu Navi jumped in and he did it on his own. So Tosfos over here, it's l'chayra machlekes in Tosfos. Tosfos in Ksubis and Daf Kuf Gimel is bringing a shita that says kivet tzadikim and amatam. Tosfos in B'Metzia says that's not the real story. Come on, kivet tzadikim yematama, and that's not the real deal. Now, if you look in Shulchan Aruch, in the Rambam, the Rif, the Rosh, the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, etc., none of the poskim say that kivet tzadikim and amatama. They all seem to come to the conclusion that kivet tzadikim are yematama, just like anybody else's kever. This I have over here. I brought it. I'm not going to do anything with it, but I brought it over here. It's a sefer called Tzil Nefesh Chaya. This entire sefer, the whole fat sefer, is about this inyan of kivet tzadikim. Lahatzdik es haminig al inyan hishtatchus shel kahanim al kivet tzadikim. Acham Isasam, Bir Gadol Shitas thing, Sefer Jus, Chasidus, Kabbalah, V'chulu. It's a whole sefer, a whole fat sefer, not in defense, but in defense of the minig of Kahanim that they're Matama Tamesim or Tzadikim. Maybe before the Kvura, maybe after the Kvura. And what's interesting about the sefer is, I think it's come out unique. You won't find this by a lot of Svarim. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Haskamas, all from iconic Gedolim. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Rav Ruderman, Rav Yitzchak, the Minchas Yitzchak, Rav Hutner, Rav Moshe, Rav Shem Zalman Auerbach, and the Shevet HaLevi. And I didn't double check this today, but look during Cup. Every single one of them reiterates in the Haskama, after that the halacha is zikr, not like what you're saying in the Sefer, but you did a nice job, you masader all these different shitas, Tairihi, Lumd, Tzarech. I think without fail, all 9 of these rabbis, I think it's come out unique to the Sefer. that all 9 maskimim should feel the need to remind the mechaber that the halacha is not like him. But but to his credit, he's just explaining the sugi. He's justifying the sugi. To his credit, in the Hakdama right away, he says in the first page of the Hakdama, he says, "V'zayis tzarach ani lo hidia, ki eina mechuvin b'chiburi zeh loheris chas shalom halacha l'maisa eze kula b'tomas kainu mitzadikim." I'm not really trying to tell you that tzadikim allowed to be mitama. I tried to collect everything that it said and to go through it. So he himself is very well aware of the fact that the halacha is not like the proposition. The whole premise of the sefer is faulty. The halacha is not like this proposition. But I'm just showing you that this is an Indian that one could compile. It's a Zayar. The Zayar Kaddish seems to say it in 2-3 places that Kibbutz Tzadikim and not Matama. So this is the shmooze. Now the halacha is not like that. But now what's interesting is seemingly we have like a stira in the policy over here, right? You have the Medrash of the Rav Akiva that seems to tell us that Eliyahu Hanavi was matama himself to Rav Akiva. Mitzacheni, if Taisus being madchit, saying no, he can't bring a raya from it. So how do you resolve that story? How do you resolve the Rav Akiva episode with Eliyahu Hanavi? So there's a fascinating Avnei Nezer. It's a tshuva all about Tumas Meis, and in the Avnei Nezer has like a brilliant chap. It's like a mix of Kabbalah and Halacha. But he says something interesting. He says there are 2 reasons why a body of a person becomes tamei, a corpse is tamei after the person dies. He says reason number 1 is because when the Malach HaMavis comes with his sword, he cuts the person's neck, and this is a chazal. The Gemara says that the Malach HaMavis says about himself, be'etzem, I would cut people open like an animal. But mishum k'veidesh of people, I just do an internal decapitation. I don't actually cut people open. So the Malach HaMavis has a figurative sword. The sword is dipped in some kind of poison, some sort of eres. And when the Malach HaMavis, cuts this person or drops the eres into his mouth, whatever he does, the eres itself, the poison itself that the Malach HaMavis brings to the table to do his job, causes the body to decompose and to become, tamei. And this is really in Meforshei Gemara. The Gemara in Sukkah says this. Hu hamemis. This eres is what kills him. This eres is what makes the basar b'masriach, and this eres is what makes him tamei. That's reason number 1, and that's the common reason. That's for everybody. But, says the Avnei Nezer, if you look in Rav Chaim Vital and the Arizal, there's a different reason why the body becomes tamei after a person dies. It says the reason is, when the neshama leaves the body is now bereft of whatever little kedusha it had, and automatically it seeks to cleave on to some sort of other kaiches, and the kaiches atumah attach themselves, and it becomes tamei. Okay, whatever that means. We don't have to get into as I state. Says the Avnei Nezer as follows. Says this, that the Malach HaMavis comes with his sword, and he kills people and puts the eres into them and makes them tamei, that's only when the Malach HaMavis is involved. But a death that doesn't involve the Malach HaMavis, so there's no sword involved. And he says, what's a death that doesn't involve the Malach HaMavis? Anything that's like a sudden death, like a tragic sudden death. He said the Malach HaMavis comes, men shel chahed, he makes an appointment, he takes the person aside, and he puts him to death with his sword. Someone will later get hit by a car, or eat some poison, or just drowns, or falls off a bridge, whatever it is, the Malach HaMavis is not involved. That's just dying, that's just dying. The Malach HaMavis is not involved. The Malach HaMavis is not involved. There's none of that, poisonous Malach HaMavis eres that causes this tumah. Doesn't exist. He says Navas. People become tamei anyhow because. What do you say? Yeah, they're also, but he says that people become tamei anyhow because the body attaches itself to chitzonim. So says the Avnei Nezer something fascinating. He says a tzaddik, Talmud Chacham, a tzaddik, whose guf is kaddish, unless he's killed by the Malach HaMavis, his body doesn't become tamei. Because his body is too holy for the kaiches hatumah to attach themselves to. His body is already purified. It doesn't attach itself to the hatumah the kaiches. The only thing that could possibly make it tamei is the Malach HaMavis' poison. So says the Avnei Nezer, and this is like a great Polish Kabbalistic halachic chap. He says, this is the resolution. He says, Eliyahu Hanavi was only able to say Kibbutz Tzadikim and Matama in the particular circumstance of Rav Akiva. Rav Akiva was a kaddish. He was the Gedolei Tanoim, the most halig person that could be, and he was killed, put to death by the sword. He wasn't killed in a normal fashion. The Malach HaMavis involved. He says the Malach HaMavis was not involved, and there's no outside tumah involved. So Rav Akiva was tar, and he says Rav Akiva was tar. So he says Eliyahu Hanavi was able to come and pick him up, but everybody else, any other case, of course, even Eliyahu Hanavi's maskim that Kibbutz Tzadikim that it's in Tama, and that's why Taisus and Bava Metzia says that Eliyahu Hanavi would never hold like this. Now this machlekes grada rages on. The V'chaskel, the Shinava is strongly against it. The Minchas Elazar justifies it a little bit. I'm not even trying to get into that topic so much. My point is just to highlight this fascinating Avnei Nezer that makes a discrepancy between how a person dies. The Avnei Nezer is clearly saying a major nafkamina lahalacha call it, in the method of a person's death. And if a person dies in some sort of quick, tragic fashion, there's no Malcham Avos involved. It's a different kind of death. Call it what you want. It has a different kind of death. And then Afkaminas would be like Avituma, in the case of a tzaddik. But if a person dies, in a normal fashion, then it's done up in Malcham Avos. So you see over there some sort of distinction between like a death that's done through the Malcham Avos and a death that's not done through the Malcham Avos. Now, another detail of this, like a similar distinction that I want to point out, is as follows. There's a din in Shulchan Aruch. This is a din in Shulchan Aruch. It's not so widely adhered to anymore for whatever reason. The din in Yeridei and Siman Shin Lamed Tes Sif Hey is a din in Hilchos Avelos that says as follows. If a person dies in a neighborhood, the halacha is he's supposed to pour out the water that's in the neighborhood. Any water that's in a pitcher or that's in a bottle, he's supposed to pour it out. Ever heard of this halacha? Anybody else? It's a halacha. This is a halacha. So this is Gebrach in Shulchan Aruch. Now, if you look in Poskim, there's, I think, 3 reasons that are given. The Shach brings 3 reasons. Reason number 1 is because that's a good way to let people know about the Basura. Meaning, if you see people start pouring out their water, the next person pours out their water, you chat, something's going on in the neighborhood, and that's a way to say it without saying it. We don't want to be the guy who goes and says, Yena died, so you just do it like that. The second reason that the Shach brings is a fascinating one. The second reason the Shach says is that the Malcham Avos takes his knife when he's done doing his deed, and he dips it into the water local to clean it off, to clean his blade off.
So it's open water.
Open water. So some places can say that, since today most of our water is not open, it's in faucets, whatever, it's not relevant. But as I bring, that's my Magulam, Zaitik, but that might have been negated on his head. No, snakes. Yeah, but that might have been negated anymore. But this is maybe not. It's a great. The Velt is also not makbid on that by and large. The Chazanish is makbid, the Goyin was makbid, a lot of people not. But my point is just you have a Shach over here clearly saying that the Malcham Avos, like something very frightening, he's bringing from a kolboy, that the Malcham Avos dips his knife into the water and he washes off the blood. Now comes along later Poskim, like it's a whole collection of Poskim that handle this and say, if somebody was murdered, maybe you don't have to wipe off the, maybe you don't have to spill out the water. Meaning, according to the Shach's second rationale, that it's because the Malcham Avos wipes off his blade. So if somebody was murdered or they died in one of these sudden or tragic ways, or even suicide, that's what we talk about. Somebody commits suicide, you don't have to pour out the water in the neighborhood because the Malcham Avos was not involved. There's no Malcham Avos at the scene. He couldn't have wiped his blade off. So, and this is many different places that talk about it, different shuvas that talk about it. Again, you see another nafkamina of the particulars of the person's death playing like an nafkamina lahalacha. Now, a third nafkamina that I think is interesting is as follows. There's a fascinating tshuva from the Chassam Sofer. The Chassam Sofer in Yeridei in Tshuva Shin Lamed Gimel, he brings as follows. He says, they sent him a tshuva. It's a crazy shayla. Listen to the shayla. He says, Heviu lekan ish kadosh hanerig b'dei akum ritzeach v'nikver b'yemechad shalafanav ishmoi Reb David Shachralis Hashem Yimkem Dameh. They brought someone over here to bury him. Reb David Shachralis. He was killed by Goyim. Hashem Yimkem Dameh. The Chaver Kadisha elders were out on business and passed. They were not around. The Yungalite who are on backup duty don't know the rules of the Chaver Kadisha over here. They came and asked me a shayla as follows. Give this guy his regular plot near his forefathers, or to give him his own area away from everybody else. Why? Kishamu Oimrim, they heard people saying, Din Dalin Mises Lebatlu, which we'll explain in a second. V'achayiv Mises Bezdin Ein Kayvin Reisa B'Kivrei Avaisav. Now this is a wild idea. He said, the Gemara in Ksubis, and it's Gemara in Chulin also, the Ksubis Taf Laman and Beis, Chulin also, the Gemara says, I forgot which man the Amr it is, but Afabisha Dalad Mises, the Gemara says, Dalad Mises Bezdin Lebatlu. The Gemara says, what do you mean Lebatlu? Lebatlu. We don't do Dalad Mises Bezdin anymore. The Gemara says, no, Din Dalad Mises Lebatlu. The Din of Dalad Mises didn't end. Why? Misha Chayev X, he gets this einish. Misha is chayiv this, meaning anyone who's chayiv to get something, their Hashem won't be mesaviv that someone who's supposed to get skila will fall off a roof. Someone who's supposed to get, cherev will get cut by a knife. Someone who's supposed to get chanek will choke. Meaning Hashem will be mesaviv. The din da'al mises is not batal. So says the Chassam Sofer, they approached me with this conundrum. They said, this person was put to death by the sword. He was killed by a knife. Now, l'chayrav killed by a knife. It looks like he must have been some sort of a variant who deserved to have his neck split open. He's someone who's really getting a Mises Bezdin. And the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that someone who gets put to death for Mises Bezdin doesn't get buried with his fathers. He gets buried in an individual location. So the junior Chaver Kadisha members in Prashpur came and asked Chassam Sofer, what do we do about this? Do we look at this like this is an Avarian who got put to death and should be buried individually or not? And the Chassam Sofer goes on a little tangent over here. And he says, I looked around, I didn't see anything, and then etc. And he says, he brings actually there's a Prisha, the Torah near day in Siman Shin Mem Hey says, Misha Nafal Yam, Tava Ben Nahar, Ayachlase Chaya, which are all brutal deaths. He drowned in a river, or he fell into the water, or an animal ate him up. Ein Moina Mehem Kol Davar. And the Prisha says, Ratzulemer, what that means to say is, Afalpi, that we said that people who get killed by Bezdin don't get buried normal. Don't be chayshish that this guy got me. He says, Bezdin, this just happened. And the Sefer goes on a little bit of tshuva here, and he says, he makes a dik in the Gemara, and he ends up saying that this is not how it should go, and of course you bury this guy with his regular forefathers. But now again, you see another occurrence where the method of death, meaning the autopsy report that shows that this person was killed by the sword in some sort of tragic manner, makes us question the halachic status again. So you see, I don't know if this is like 3-4 examples of the particulars of a person's death. You know, chapping enough community and how to look at the person. It impacts what how we look at this person after he dies. Now these are like the halachic examples of it. Now in like the Musa Svarim and the Kabbalah Svarim, so then there's a lot more things. Like if a person dies on an Erev Shabbos, a person dies in a Beis Medrash, a person dies in a mikvah. These are all highly gezachen. Like a person dies in a mikvah, or a person dies right after the mikvah, a person dies in Beis Medrash. Now one interesting one that I saw, I just want to read this one a little bit, is that there seems to be a big inyan.
What about if you commit suicide?
No, that's not a good thing. Hang on, that's not a good sim of anything. There seems to be a big inyan for a person to die while he's in middle, or people around him are in middle of learning Torah. Now, what's interesting is that it seems the Noda B'Yehuda, in his tzava or his instructions to the people around him, I want to read it from you. He says as follows. This comes from the what do you call it? The book of records in Prague, of the Noda B'Yehuda. And in there, when it talks about the Noda B'Yehuda's death, it says as follows. V'chein na'agu al pi pekudas ha'goyin and bezdin etzel p'tiras admor nasi Yisrael ab bezdin tekilaseinu ha'goyin Rabbi Cheskel Landau Zazal. That's the Noda B'Yehuda. Also mishmaris acha mishmaris mibachurim b'nei bar Rav. They had, mishmar, cycle after cycle of groups of bachrim who would come in to learn. They were standing in the room next door, his Rebbitzon's room, right outside his window, where he was laying on his deathbed, where he was lying while he was a geisis. They kept chazering over Mishnayis Kachim again and again. And this became the minig in Prague, that any Adam Chashav, any important person, a Chashav person, they would make this type of mishmar by his bedside to ensure that the person dies, b'teich divrei Torah. You want to know about mikveh in particular? Someone, what did he say? He wants mikveh? The Chassidish, you don't want to know if someone dies in the mikveh. I don't know, it happened to my wife's great-grandfather. It was nifter, teveling on Erev Shabbos in White Lake, in the lake over there, where we go boating. It's a thing also. I don't know, the different, more Chassidish farm. But B'chlal, the Mekubalim say if someone dies when they're in the middle of a mitzvah, that's a siman toiv.
Is that one thing in drowning?
What?
Mikvah and drowning.
Litvak. It's a mikvah. It's a mikvah.
Depends if you drowned or
there
if you
is?
died, and then...
Okay. In any case, one second. I think this is, what does siman toiv mean? How do I know?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.